Warrami, hello. My name is Stacey Brandon. I'm a proud Darug woman from Blackheath in the Blue Mountains. Today I come to you from Moree in Gamilaroi country. I would like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land of which we meet today and pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging. I would also like to extend that respect to Aboriginal people present here today and the lands from which you come. I would now like to pass you over to Katrina Lowe, New South Wales Public Service Commissioner. Thank you.
Thank you, Stacey, and good morning, everyone. Before I go any further, I'd like to acknowledge that I'm joining this session from the land of the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation and pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging. I also pay my respects to our Aboriginal colleagues who are joining us today. I'd like to warmly welcome all of you to our International Day of People with Disability event, and a special welcome to our colleagues from DENconnect and to our DEN chairs and leads from across the sector. We're so very fortunate to be able to draw on the knowledge and expertise of our DEN chairs and leads in not only planning today's event, but in the policy and program work we do at the Public Service Commission to support the sector. So before we proceed any further, I'd just like to mention a couple of housekeeping matters. Firstly, we want to know how this event has helped you or challenged your thinking. So after the event, you'll receive an email with a link to a survey where you can let us know your feedback and the practical actions you'll take or you would like us as leaders to take. Secondly, a technical matter. Live captioning is available on the left-hand side, along with the event abstract and speaker bios. You can adjust the size of any of the display windows on your screen, including the video and live captions. You just need to click on the rectangle button on the top right of each window. If you need to reset any settings, you can use the Restore button at the bottom of your screen. This year's theme is Leadership and Participation of Persons with Disabilities towards an Inclusive, Accessible and Sustainable Post-COVID-19 World. Now, that's a lot to unpack over the next hour, but we have a fantastic lineup of speakers who are here to share their stories and vision for how we can make our workplaces more inclusive, accessible and sustainable. But before we do that though, I'd like to introduce Kirsten Fishburn, who was appointed as Secretary of the Department of Planning, Industry and Environment last month. Kirsten brings a new energy to DPI with ambitions to progress both the department's reform agenda and build on the cultural transformation started under the previous Secretary, Jim Betts. Kirsten has been part of DPI since 2020, where she's led the Innovative Planning Delivery Unit, overseeing the acceleration of more than 600 complex planning matters, equating to over $57 billion in economic benefits. Kirsten has also headed up DPI's Office of Local Government and the Strategy and Innovation teams, where she led major statewide responses to the COVID-19 pandemic. Before joining DPI, Kirsten led Liverpool City Council for 4 years as their Chief Executive Officer. Her professional career has been devoted to public service, with leadership roles at the City of Sydney, the Casula Powerhouse Arts Centre, and Accessible Arts, which is New South Wales's peak arts and disability organisation. Kirsten and I and our teams have been working together to deliver a whole-of-government policy to ensure that we have consistent, dynamic, flexible and inclusive workplaces across our sector. I'm proud to hand over to Kirsten now to tell you more about this important initiative.
Thank you very much, Katrina, and thank you for that very warm welcome. It's a really great pleasure to be here with you today on the International Day of People with a Disability, and I'm coming from Wiradjuri land in Orange, so hello. The theme, as Katrina said, for International Day this year is leadership and participation of persons with disabilities towards an inclusive, accessible and sustainable post-COVID-19 world. And this theme couldn't be more fitting for today's launch. I have an enormous personal passion for disability and inclusion, and I had the pleasure, as Katrina told you, of working for Accessible Arts for 5 years, and it's amongst the highlights of my career, the work I got to do in that space. I've only been the secretary for a few weeks, but on my very first day in the chair with DPI, I shared with my staff a list of projects that were very important to me and that I wanted to champion as the secretary. One of those projects is the DPI Disability Access Audit, where we want to ensure that everything DPI delivers internally and externally is inclusive, consistent, and effective for people with disability. We plan to establish and embed best practice principles across the cluster to ensure we create inclusive policy, services, and infrastructure, with things really kicking off with the Accessible Office Design Framework, which we are launching today. It's a really huge step forward in demonstrating best practice and government's leadership in this space. The framework will apply to all New South Wales government tenanted commercial office buildings across Metro Sydney and regional New South Wales. It takes New South Wales government beyond compliance to ensure that our workplaces accommodate and support a wide variety of employee needs, therefore making them truly inclusive workplaces. It supports the New South Wales government's goal to become an employer of choice for people with disability by providing an objective framework that makes sure our workplaces are genuinely accessible. In 2018, 16.9% of the New South Wales population identified as having a disability. We're not reaching that in our public sector employees. We need to see better representation of the communities that we serve. This framework will help us. It will help support the Premier's priority of 5.6% of public sector roles to be held by people with disability by 2025. I want to tell you a little bit about the Accessible Office Design Framework. Over time, the framework will make it easier for New South Wales Government cluster asset facility leads and industry stakeholders to go beyond compliance with accessibility regulation, and this is a bit I'm absolutely passionate about, embedding best practice universal design into each and every workplace. Inclusive design, of course, requires us to consider both the commercial and the human impact of our workplaces. And this framework will help guide us to make better business decisions, future-proof our assets, and make our workplaces work for everyone. Today is the soft launch of the guide and framework, which I'm proud to say is now live, my team have told me, on the DPI website within the Property and Development New South Wales site. Early next year, an online self-assessment tool will go through a thorough testing phase before we launch this incredible initiative to the wider property sector targeting mid-2022. That's going to be a moment that we're all going to be exceptionally proud of. The self-assessment tool makes it even easier to go beyond compliance with existing accessibility legislation and requirements. I'd really like to thank everyone from the Public Service Commission and from DPI's own Property and Development New South Wales team for leading this initiative. I'm very lucky. I've got Tiffany from the team here with me today, and she couldn't be more proud, and I know the team couldn't be more proud of the work they've done. I'm proud of you. Your passion for making New South Wales government workplaces more accessible is inspiring. I'm really proud to be here today and to launch this incredible initiative. I look forward to seeing the industry embrace this in the future and working with you to make workplaces work for everyone. Thank you.
Thank you, Kirsten. It's been such a privilege for the team at the PSC to work with your department to deliver such an important initiative for our sector. And I do want to acknowledge that staff with disability from across our sector, as well as asset managers from across the sector, had input into the development of the framework. Now we're going to hear directly from our colleagues across the sector to unpack today's theme around accessibility, inclusion and sustainability so we can understand what good practice looks like. As leaders, Kirsten and I and other leaders on the line will listen deeply and honour your stories, and more importantly, we'll look to what actions we can undertake from today. And now I'd like to introduce our wonderful panel members. So you met Stacey Brandon, who gave our acknowledgement of country. Stacey has worked at the Department of Customer Service for 4 years and is currently a customer service representative and driver tester. Previously, Stacey worked in the transport cluster for New South Wales Trains in Dubbo. Her career has primarily been in customer service roles. Stacey is supported by her loving husband, Scott. She has 2 adult sons, a daughter and a bonus daughter. Stacey has been hard of hearing from the age of 2 and relied heavily on lip reading and physical placement of herself to manage her disability until the past few years when technological advances made a hearing aid possible for her. Stacey will tell you that she's become very well versed at masking her disability to appear, in her words, normal. Stacey loves spending time with her family. She loves travelling around New South Wales and the country to see different sites and experience everything this country has to offer, all with a bit of shopping along the way. Next, I'd like to introduce Mandy Barneo. Mandy's worked at Transport for New South Wales for 13 years, where she's currently Program Manager for Fixing the Country Roads program. Previously, she worked in media, where she ran a family consultancy and production business. Mandy lives with post-traumatic stress disorder, an invisible disability as the result of significant trauma that she's experienced. She's a strong advocate for sharing disability and believes being open and honest about her disability helps her to both manage it and helps others who may be unsure about sharing their experiences. Next, I'd like to introduce Adam Caddy. Adam is manager in the Fines and Fees team at Revenue New South Wales, where he's worked for 15 years. He is the proud father of 4 boys and is a keen photographer and videographer. He lives with a physical disability in his legs and back. Adam and his wife also face the daily challenges that come with being the parent to their 10-year-old son who has autism and is non-verbal. Experiencing the highs and lows of living with a disability himself, as well as being a carer, Adam has become a passionate advocate for disability inclusion and awareness, particularly in the workplace. Next, I'd like to introduce Angela Eckert Gazad. Angela is the Customer Services Knowledge, Quality and Training Manager at HealthShare New South Wales' Customer Experience Directorate. Angela believes in people and the power of optimism. She strives to help people shine and believes that when we can show up as ourselves, we can do our best work. On a sunny day in 2015, Angela's life changed. Since then, she's moved through the world with colourful mobility aids, which I think I see in the background there, and has become an even more passionate advocate for diversity, inclusion and belonging. And finally, we were to have another panel member with us by the name of Andreas Hager, but unfortunately he's unwell today and can't make it, and he does send his apologies. But just by way of background, Andreas is the Executive Director of the New South Wales Bar Association and previously a Director in the Policy Reform and Legislation Branch at the New South Wales Department of Communities and Justice. Now, on to the questions. I'm going to start with Adam. Adam, we just heard from Kirsten about the new accessible office design framework for our sector. While the physical environment is one part of the accessibility journey, what more can we do to build accessibility and inclusion into our everyday work practices?
Yeah, hi. Firstly, I just want to say thank you for this opportunity. It's I'm so grateful for the opportunity to speak on such an important day. To answer the question, we need to continue to create that awareness for all staff, and an event like this is a great example of where we can share our stories and experiences. Our today and tomorrow leaders need to be equipped ready and able to have supportive and constructive conversations with positive outcomes for all parties, that being the individual, the teams, and the business organisational goals as well. We need to encourage those in teams to share their stories. However, we need to make sure that those environments that they're in, that there's trust and honesty, and they feel comfortable to have those conversations and share those, be able to speak up. We've got a long way to go, but the non-physical support starts with those open and honest conversations. Every person I've met, disability, no disability, any background, they just want to be treated as equal, and we just want to be on that same level playing field at the end of the day. And I was trying to put it into an example, and I thought if I'm in a swimming race against Kyle Chalmers, he's going to beat me every day. But if I put certain supports in place and mechanisms in place to allow me to perform on the same playing field, as long as I put the effort in, I will be able to perform as equal as someone with that able body as well. So, but it does start with that honest conversation from both parties.
Thank you, Adam, and I couldn't agree more with your comments around inclusive workplaces and fairness and equity in workplaces, and inclusion in our workplaces benefits everybody, not just people with disability. I'm going to turn to Mandy now. Mandy, how can leaders and people managers lead the conversation about accessible workplaces with their staff?
Well, I was really fortunate this morning to have heard Kurt Fernley, our awesome Olympian, speak on disability. And I will quote what he said: "Nothing is more empowering than employment for people with disability." And so if we're coming from that framework, we need our leaders and our people that we aspire to be, and I suppose we need them to understand that caring about their people is one of the most important things that they can do. You care about the staff, you make sure your staff understand what's expected of them, but understand where you can assist them to progress their careers or be able to perform their best work. You give them the tools that they need to perform their best work, regardless of if they've got a disability or not. You want to create a culture in your organisation that is safe for people to disclose that they've got a disability or disclose that there's something going on in their life that's impacting their ability to work, whether that is something that's personal, whether that's a disability, whether that's something going on in their life that's impacting. If we're having leaders that want to create a good environment and a good culture, they have to be aware of their people, their individuals that are working for them, and really connect on that level. We can't have people that aren't connecting with their staff, because it's not going to work. Being open about being flexible. COVID has taught us given us amazing gift that we wouldn't have got to without this, and that is, we can think outside the box. We can open up to ways of working that haven't been thought of as being productive. We've had to push a lot of people to want this flexibility in the past. And in 2020, we were pushed in ourselves, and we swam. So we were able to meet that challenge. Why did it take a global pandemic to offer flexibility that's really greatly needed in the disability space? And now we know we can do things. Now we know we don't have to be pushed over to achieve that. We can actually think outside the box and get that moving. And by speaking with our people, asking them what works best for them, how are they going to give their best, being able to deliver on an equal pairing with their colleagues in their cohort. I would say to leaders, educate yourself, educate your teams, make that an important part of your leadership skill set and in your toolbox, you're able to know how to lead people with disability. Build that area of skills so it's equal with any other of the skills that you have. We know you've got stakeholder relationship skills. We know you've got skills using the tools that you use, but skills with people with disability, being honest and open and creating that safe environment is the way to go. And I would ask all leaders to go online, go and Google, type in disability leadership or leadership for disability. You'll find an amazing wealth of information there that can help you broaden your skill set and be that next level leader that us with disability need you to be.
Thanks, Mandy, and thanks so much for underlining the importance of leadership, education and awareness and skills development in creating the workplace cultures that we need to support people with disability. At the PSC, we're really proud that we've created an environment that's safe for everybody, where people can bring their whole selves to work, and 12% of our staff have identified as having a disability, and we're grateful that they feel that they can disclose that to us in the workplace. I'd like to turn to Angela now. Angela, your life changed very suddenly in 2015, and I'm wondering whether you can tell us a bit about how that shifted the conversation with people around you, including your colleagues.
Absolutely. Thanks, Katharina. So the way that the conversation evolved was that a conversation started. It was the first time in my life that I needed to talk about accessibility needs. Accessibility was something that I had been able to take for granted. I had that privilege of being able to get myself to where I needed to go. And through, as you said, it was a very sudden event. I was at home on a sunny day, and all of a sudden life changed really quickly, and it continued to change in very unexpected ways following on from that event, in both physically and also psychologically. Throughout the conversations that I needed to have, I was trying to explain something very complex that I didn't quite understand myself during a time when I was really unclear on what my way forward was, and trying to have conversations about how will I get into the office at work? How can I continue to work? Work is such a key part of everybody's self-esteem, in addition to the financial aspects. And for me, what I found was that a lot of the conversations were awkward and uncomfortable, and I don't want anyone to feel like you should shy away from those conversations, because they really need to happen. We can all grow together, and it can create that connection. So it's something that I really encourage us all to start thinking about, the fact that anyone's life can change at any moment. Why wait for something to happen, or why wait until we have a specific individual that we need to talk to about accessibility? Instead, perhaps what we could ask is, what can I do to help you succeed? What do you need from us to do your best work?
Thank you, Angela, for sharing a little bit about your story and the challenges you've faced, and the advice, the really good practical advice about how we can make those conversations just a bit easier for people. I'm now going to turn to Stacey. Stacey, you've worked in a frontline role, including during COVID. Are you able to share with us some of the environmental and attitudinal barriers that you faced in the workplace? And how did your colleagues work with you to overcome them?
Thanks, Katharina, and thank you for the opportunity to tell my story here with everybody today. As you've heard, I've been deaf in my left ear since I was about 2. The culture back in the 80s was to appear normal as much as possible. So for the last 40 plus years, I've become very adverse at masking my disability, to the point that my colleagues didn't even know here for the last 2.5 years that I had a hearing impairment. I refused to wear my hearing aid. So in the last 40 years, I become very adverse in lip reading. When COVID hit, wasn't such a, to start with, it wasn't such a big deal out in the regional areas until the compulsory mask wearing happened out here. Now that Monday morning I came into work and we had to wear compulsory masks. I work frontline in a service, New South Wales, in the service centre. I'm also a driver tester. We're very busy, especially first thing on a Monday morning. Everyone's coming in wearing masks. We've had the plastic screens go up on our counters to protect the staff. I couldn't lip read. I couldn't communicate with my customers. The noise level was through the roof. I couldn't lip read to hear what they were saying. And first time in 40 years, I was in a situation where I couldn't cope. It was enormous. I didn't know what to do. Pretty much, I literally just wanted to walk out the back door and go home. I was very fortunate that my manager at that particular time, I could Teams her and explain that I can't communicate right now. And she said, it's okay, we've got you, go out the back, give me a call. And it was a matter of trying to work with her in finding a situation on how that was going to help. We've got hearing loops in the centre, that's fine, I was actually at that counter, but it was picking up a lot of background distortion. I could hear 4 counters away. So that's a situation that's also being rectified. But that manager worked really well with me at that time, was able to ground me again. The staff here have been fantastic. They now know, because we're still mask wearing to this day, they know to drop their masks so I can lip read. They also know not to sneak up on me because I can't hear them coming. But the challenging thing that I've also noticed coming across, it's not just from a staff point of view, it's our customers as well. And a lot of them have learnt very quickly that I lip read, and they also drop their masks. And they feel comfortable knowing there's a staff member here, and especially in a regional area, that understands their needs and understands their struggles and their communication level. We had one customer, like, as you know, I'm from Moree, Boggabilla to our north is currently flooding. We had one particular customer come in through COVID who wore a hat, and she'd written in Texter across her hat, I am deaf, please drop mask, I lip read. Like, that really hit home for me here. And I'm starting to self-teach a little bit of sign for myself. Out here, there's not a lot of opportunity to learn sign language on a more formal level. So through training bases online, I'm picking up a little bit. So I was able to sign a little bit with her, but she could lip read just as well as I could. So the communication level was really good there. The staff having to deal with learning with me as well, they've also learnt to be a little bit more accommodating with the customers, especially noticing if they've got a hearing aid, noticing they may need to lip read and dropping the mask. So that's been the biggest challenge that I've faced as a frontliner, because the screens have blocked sound, the masks are blocking a visual, and it's great protecting everyone's health, but it's creating a barrier that I honestly, in 40 years, would never have thought that I would ever come across. So, yeah, thank you, Katrina.
Thank you, Stacey, for sharing your experiences and some of those practical challenges that, as you said, you probably couldn't have anticipated in a million years would be a problem for you. And what I found really interesting in what you said was, I guess, the positive for the customers in knowing you were there and knowing that you could understand their experiences. And I think that's a very good argument as to why we need to increase our employment with people with disability so that we more closely reflect the community that we serve. I'm going to move to Mandy now, and that's actually a nice segue to the next question, which is about the New South Wales Government's Premier's priority on a world-class public service, which has a target for greater employment of people with disability. So Mandy, I'd be really interested in your thoughts on whether the target is aspirational enough or too aspirational. What more do you think we could be doing?
Well, the Premier's priority, let's have a look. It's 5.6% across public service. Now, the reality is that almost 1 in 5 people in Australia have a disability. If we're looking at that 5% that we're after, that's 1 in 18. So there's a good chance that a lot of people with disabilities either don't realise what they have is a disability, and they just think, they've made adjustments, and they're not, they're not aware of their categorisation. I was speaking to someone yesterday who had a back condition and said, I haven't got a disability, but there are times when I really need some adjustments at work. That person does have a disability, and they are not aware to understand and put that into their work applications where we can see that they have a disability. So the 5.6%, I think, is aspirational. It is achievable. We're not asking for 1 in 4. We're not asking for 1 in 5. We're asking for 1 in 18. And that's not too hard to get if we do focus on it, and how we get our leaders, how we get our recruitment to do that targeted recruiting. We've done that for women in leadership positions. We've done that for Indigenous people. We've done that with people with multicultural backgrounds. The people with the disabilities are one of the last group of people that need to have those focus for employment. Employment is critical. If you know that you've got a job and then you get a disability, the first thing is, how am I going to pay? How am I going to live? What am I going to do? How am I going to feed my family? How am I going to pay for medications? What am I going to be a burden? If you're born with a disability, you've had that time to understand and to grow and understand what you need, and you still have those issues. I was looking at some statistics, and it said graduates with a disability are finding it 61% harder to get employment within that first year. So that is an enormous amount of talent that we're not being able to utilise. When we do think of the traditional recruitment methods, eye contact, that physically harms people with autism, some people with autism, I should say. It's a physically damaging or painful response to making eye contact, and yet that's one of our standards. Shaking hands, we don't do that in COVID, but for a lot of people, that's a very, if they're suffering from mental health disorder, or they've got OCD, or they're panicked about touching, that is a huge problem. Expecting people to do their best in a recruitment setting that's not designed for everyone is very difficult. So unless we target how we're looking at recruiting, making it easy, using plain English, if everyone has a look at our recruitment, we can see that it's very public servant speak. It's not really plain English. We're talking about scaffolds, we're talking about focus areas, we're talking about, do you meet these different criterias? It's really not plain English, and it does segregate people that are also having learning difficulties. They can't do the assessments, they can't do the really crisp work that they've got to do. They find the testing is a barrier to education. So we really have to think outside the box. How do we get these people in targeted programs? The department that I'm with, Transport for New South Wales, we're getting our second targeted program for people with autism. Our first one is amazing. we've got some really awesome talent that have come through there, and we've nurtured them, and we've made sure that they feel safe, and they've got an ability to flourish and thrive in our organisation, and we're having a place for them. So this targeted employment, using the rules that we already have, like Rule 26, to retain people, that is increasingly important. To once we've got them into our organisations, how do we treat them? How do we retain them? How do we nurture them and give them the ability to make their career something spectacular? And that's what we need to do as leaders. And that's the Premier's priority. It's not just 1.6 or 5.6%. It is the people behind that. It's representing our communities that we serve as public servants. It's recognising that we should, as public servants, be able to provide our own experience in creating our products and services and programs that we supply. So I think that more can be done. Education is the key, getting people on the ground level. Once you get into the public service, you should understand how to treat your colleagues, no matter who they are. You should understand if someone needs some assistance, that, they're not a burden to you. They're going to be offering you something that maybe is intangible. And that's the key, I think. You're not going to maybe get someone who's going to come in and do everything quickly and fast, but the intangibles that person brings to the organisation and your team are critical to having a really well-rounded public service.
Thanks so much, Mandy. And you've made some really good observations around accessibility and recruitment. And then once we get people in the door and employ them, ensuring that we provide them with the support that they need. I'm going to ask you a follow-up question now, just off the issue of targets. When we think about targets, they can seem narrowing for people with intersecting identities. And I was wondering whether you can talk us through that identity tension as a member of the LGBTIQA+ community and somebody who has a disability as well.
It's really interesting from a personal perspective. When I was born, my father had one leg. He lost his leg to cancer at 16. I view disability as that. I view disability as something in your face, someone with a missing limb, someone with no hearing, someone who was blind. I really didn't view disability the way I have my own disability, which is post-traumatic stress disorder. And I really didn't come to terms with that until probably 4 years ago, when I had a significant trauma, and it brought things back, and I really had to do some really self-diagnosis, really, where I said, you know what, I've got a problem. I need to have some help. Went to my doctor, explained the situation, and gradually understood that, yes, I have a disability. It's not something that is just nothing to be worried about. It is something that I have to manage. And the thing is that I'm also a gay woman. I identify as being a lesbian. I found that much easier to say than having a disability. And I've found a lot of people feel the same. It's a lot more, I suppose it's my whole human being as being a person with a disability, as well as a gay woman, as well as a mum, as well as a wife, as well as a proud auntie. It is what I am. But more and more I'm finding that people with disabilities are less inclined to say that they have one. Maybe they don't realise that what they're living with is impacting them, and that is a disability that they've got, and they need to look at that and sort of see whether they're comfortable about saying to their employers, listen, I need to have some flexibility. I don't sleep, or I'm on medication, or I've got some adjustments that I need, and it's not apparent all the time, but in some weeks or months, it's going to exacerbate. And then we've got people that are living with day-to-day issues. So I think treating people as individuals and getting to know them and how they work. If you look at people with gender and sex diversity, 2 times more likely to have a disability, and that is a huge number, like double the amount. So, when we're looking at people, we have to look at them as who they are, what they bring, how they can connect to their colleagues, and in the gender diverse realm of people, we really do have this, pride in our identity as someone in that community, but the disability side of things is where we've got to really push and be comfortable and feel safe about. So it's really the safety, I think, is the main goal here, to be comfortable to say, this is who I am, this is what I need to do my best at my work, this is what I need to be a really good colleague and represent the organisation and represent the community.
Thanks so much for sharing your very personal experience and for emphasising the point that for people to disclose their disability, they need to feel safe, which is really, I think, a key takeaway. I'm going to turn to Stacey now for the next question. Stacey, in your experience as a customer-facing staff member, what do you feel needs to change?
With this, both Adam and Mandy have touched on this quite extensively. Communication. As a frontline staff member who myself, as I put it out, I didn't come out with my disability for quite some time. I needed to feel safe. I didn't even recognise myself as having a disability for a very long time. And once you get that recognition, realising yourself that, oh my God, I do, you sort of wonder what's out there, what's available to you. And as I spoke earlier about when COVID hit here and my world crumbled, I actually, as a frontline member, didn't know where to go, apart from ringing the manager, which was a little out of my comfort zone because, like Mandy was just saying, I wasn't comfortable talking about my disability because I didn't want to be seen that way, but it's become my norm now. Like, my disability is everything at the moment. I can make a big difference now. I can help people coming through. I can help my customers. But what I've found is lack of communication. Policies and procedures are made at your senior executive levels. They don't always filter through to the grassroots. And I'm at the bottom of the ladder, so to speak. I'm frontline. I'm at the your grassroots. I didn't know where to go. I've been with the service for 4 years now, and it was thankful I'd done some mentoring with AND for a disability mentorship program that I had one person, Danny Freed, who most people would know, to go to say, help, what do I do? Where do I go? Managers didn't know about the disability passport. A lot of adjustments are not known about. More than that's known is that adjustments actually don't cost a lot. There's not a lot of adjustments that require actual financial input, and it doesn't come out of your budgets. There is actually a budget set aside with the ability group that can do these, that pull from those for any adjustments that are needed. But most of the adjustments that people with a disability need don't require financial backing. But I've found management don't know this. The communication is not coming through from upper level down to the grassroots. We've found in People and Culture, we're actually doing a disability toolkit led by Coralie George. And in that group, we're putting together a list of toolkits on where people can go for that information and that knowledge. Because like myself, I've found a few staff members that haven't been comfortable in discussing their disability. They didn't want to be perceived as different from their peers. They didn't want to be seen to be getting extras that other staff members aren't getting, but it's not like that. It's an adjustment so we can perform at front level the best customer service to everybody. And, you know, and that's what we want to do. That's where our passion is. We want to provide that customer service. I live and breathe it every day. I love it when they come in. But we need that support sometimes to be able to do that job. And to be able to do that job, we need management to understand and feel comfortable to be able to talk to our leaders to say, look, we need this help, we need this adjustment. What I've come across in working with people and culture team on the disability toolkit is that there's a lot of training out there, and also with the ability ERG. To join that, I had to do the disability training. Now there's a disability training for staff members, and there's also one for managers. I personally feel this needs to be included in their, you know, their first lot of packages when they join up and all their training that they do, because you need to understand, if you don't have a disability yourself, how to communicate, how to get the best out of your employees, and, you know, and work with them. I've previously had a manager that said I had focus face, and I didn't know what that meant for a little while. I do now. What that means is I'm concentrating on what the customer's saying. I'm doing my job, but I have to lip read and I have to process what they're saying. So at the end of the day, I go home twice as exhausted because I'm trying to do 2 days worth of work in one, because you're trying to understand, communicate, do your job, and you know, not mask your disability and cope with that at the same time. And there's a lot of people that do just that. And the staff here for myself have been very accommodating and understand. Sometimes I just need to walk out, have 5, come back in just to recharge. But there's another staff member that I have spoken to recently who was also a digital frontline worker who is hearing impaired, but later in life didn't have it from birth or young age like I did. He wasn't able to keep fulfilling his role. He had to change because he didn't know who to go to, who to speak to, what was available to him. So he thought his avenue was to, let's look for another job, still in the customer service role, but move into a different field, because he couldn't maintain the role that he was doing. So I guess the bottom line with what I'm trying to get out to you all is communication, and I think that's come across quite strongly with the other panelists as well, is your policies and procedures that you've set in place, make sure they flow through, and that your other leaders below you are understanding what's needed, and do the training, understand where we're all coming from, and have the conversations. Because people like myself, I wasn't game enough to come out, and I'll put my hand up for that. I wasn't game to talk about my disability. I'm now encouraging others to do the same. It is so liberating now that I can come out and say, "Oi, I can't hear you guys," lip read, and help other people come out and ask for help at the same time.
Thank you. I think there's a lot of good takeaways in what you've just said there, Stacey. I'm going to move to Adam now. Adam, during the pandemic, there have been changes in the way that we work. And as we come out the other side, hopefully sooner rather than later, I'm keen to understand what you've learnt from this, and are there things you think that we should keep doing and also stop doing as we come out the other side?
Yeah, there's so much I've learnt during this as a manager and a staff member, just a person as well. I think we definitely need to continue to support with the flexibility where reasonable. One thing we need to stop and leave behind is the attitude of needing to manage with line of sight. I think we need to be able to we need to work on that trust and honesty with the workforce up and down, so we can utilize that flexibility. Another thing that I picked up on during the pandemic was a lot of our colleagues who are quite physically disabled, lost, and mentally as well, lost their support network in their personal time. They'd lost their workers, they lost their carers that were coming into the homes to do certain activities that, whether that be, housekeeping or even personal hygiene requirements for individuals. So, we've got colleagues that are in those situations that we're not aware of that unless we're actually having those conversations, and if they're willing to speak up about it. So creating, again, that safe environment to speak up, and so we can support in any way we can. I mean, there's limitations of a workplace to be able to support. But we had a great story in our team, and a quick shout out to my team. So proud of my team leaders and staff who are really hitting home in some of these areas. But we had a staff member come to us who, in a previous role, was almost performance managed out because of some difficulties there and lack of performance. Stacey said it before, it's difficult to come out and get that confidence and speak up. And this person, we sat down with them and had a conversation, and they were quite comfortable to talk to us about a disability they had, or multiple. Now this person, during COVID, being able to work at home, being able to put their own support mechanisms in place, it didn't cost us a cent in putting support in this for this person. And now they're one of our highest performers, which is it's fantastic. So we don't necessarily want to dismiss the idea of someone being able to perform. Dig a little deeper and start to have those conversations, and we'll get the best of our staff to do that. I think as a government employee, we can be a shining light. We can be that employer of choice with the options of flexibility that we can provide to our staff. And it's important to remember there's a lot of young parents out there that have got toddlers with a disability, and they're about to become carers themselves. And every day those parents will ask themselves questions of what is their little fella, in my case, what's my son going to be doing what kind of career, what kind of life is he going to have? If we become that employer of choice, we can really become that shining light and a real support network, and be ready and equipped to take on a workforce which is has some fantastic people involved who have disabilities that we treat equally as anyone else. But again, we also need to be mindful as we return to the norm, or with COVID now. There's a lot of social anxieties and limitations that not just people with disabilities will come across, but everyone will. But there are different anxieties that those have with a disability. Like I myself, I've got to think about footwear and what kind of bandages and all sorts of strapping I need to take and where to work each day, and that itself is just overwhelming. And no one in my sort of circle at work would realise I actually go through that. But they're some of those social anxieties that I will need to deal with, as do so many others with all their different disabilities that they need to adjust for each day.
Thank you so much for this. And I'm so very much enjoying listening to each of our panelists speak, but I'm also mindful of the time. And I do want to, I guess, finish up by addressing the same question to each of you. And that is, if you could leave us with one thought or question for us to consider as we leave this event today, what would that be? And I'd like to go to Adam first to answer that, and then I'll go around the virtual room. So Adam, what's your one thought or one question that you want us to go away thinking about?
I would like our leaders and staff who don't have people reporting to them, but specifically our leaders, those with a disability, they know the challenges they've got. They know what they're facing. I put the challenge out there. How are you going to make a difference? How will you make a difference in even just one person in your team who possibly has a disability or has a disclosed disability? How will you make that difference for them?
Thank you. Stacey, what is your one thought or question that you'd like to leave us with today?
I'd like our leaders to actually do the disability training. I'll put the call out there for you to do it and be able to communicate with your teams and understand and bring out the questions with your staff to enable them, as Adam said, to get the best productivity out of your staff members. But you're only going to do that if you understand how they feel, where they're coming from, and the challenges that they face.
Thank you, Stacey. And Mandy, your one thought or question that you'd like to leave people with today?
Think about what kind of environment you want to create as a leader, the culture that you want to build around, and what your goal is to be a leader. How do you want to be thought of? Do the education, do the training, be caring, be considerate, be respectful, understand what your people are going through and how best to lead them as individuals and also as a group, and how we can reflect the people in the community that we serve as public servants. We've got a responsibility there.
Thank you, Mandy. And we'll finish up with Angela's thought.
So my challenge to leaders would be to really make a commitment today about what you're going to take from this session. Everyone's shared so graciously. It's been a joy just to hear you all. Thank you. Make a commitment, share that commitment, because you'll inspire others who weren't able to attend today, and to really keep raising your awareness. Make sure that you're learning about disability and diversity, inclusion and belonging every day, not just once a year on International Day of People with Disability, and keep that conversation going. Connection is the beginning of every great thing.
Thank you. On behalf of everybody who's listening and watching today, I want to say thank you to Angela, Mandy, Stacey and Adam for your time today and for sharing your stories and your vision for change. You've given us a lot of food for thought, but more importantly, you've given us things that we need to act upon. So I'd like to hand over to Mandy now for some closing remarks. Thank you, Mandy.
Just want to say to everyone, thank you so much for sharing your stories. I know that stories can connect us. They're really important, and they help to develop a culture and a feeling of inclusion. Thank you to all our sector colleagues for attending. We really appreciate your time. This is an amazing day for people with disability. It's where we can share what we are doing and how you can help us in achieving a balance and shaping our future. We want to hear from you. We really do want you to take that little bit of time and do the survey after this, do some training after this, have a look at how you can be an advocate for change for people with disability. Anyone here that's already someone with a disability and already doing that hard work, think about joining your local or your department's disability or carers group. We really need to have that visibility. Think about disclosing, feeling safe, talking to your team and your leadership and explaining why you do or don't feel safe. We want you to connect to your local DENconnect. We're doing some fantastic work across the cluster for accessibility, passports, how we can support our people across the organisation and make a consistency. Thank you again for listening to us, to be open to do that and see what you can do to support and care for people that work for you. So definitely do the resource checks. The Public Service Commission's website is amazing. It's got some extraordinarily important information for leaders in it. They've gone to the trouble of creating a very great package of information. And so take the time and explain that to other people, show them where it is, lead them to this information. Thank you again for your time today. Really appreciate the opportunity, and, enjoy this day, and do what you can to make it something special for people in your area or your community that have disabilities.